Hey everyone, time for another book. Today's book is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. You may recognize this name because this is the author of Girl on the Train. Now I'll say up front, I haven't read Girl on the Train, nor have I seen the movie. I was tempted, but I didn't actually see it. But I was intrigued by the premise of this book, and I admit I was intrigued by it being by Paula Hawkins. I got it through Book of the Month. So I was very excited. It is a new release. It just came out earlier this month. So the story with this book is that in a small town in England, there's this spot. It's a pool near a lake that, throughout history, women have presumably committed suicide there or been put to death there. Back when they were having the witch trials, it was a place where they would test the women to see if they were a witch or not, whether they floated or sunk. And there is a particular woman in the town who is writing a book about this history. She's very, more than fascinated, almost obsessed by this spot and why the women died there and why they chose that spot, and did they really commit suicide, some of the women. And then she dies. She herself is found dead in this place. And, presumably it's a suicide. She had been sad, she was estranged from her sister, this, that, some other thing. So there's pressure from up above to, it's a suicide, don't waste many resources on it. But it kind of comes out that, okay, maybe she was murdered. Maybe there is something else going on here. And it is the story of that investigation. And it is told from multiple points of view. Almost every chapter is a different character, switching points of view. And even within each character, it changes whether it's first person or third person. The average Goodreads rating for this was, 3.62. And I hate to say it, I really do. I had to give it a 2.5 stars. And it just... It's kind of hard to put into, one sentence. There's a lot of things I took issue with it. And reading through some of the other ratings on Goodreads, like I said, I haven't read Girl on the Train. But others did say that if you hated the characters in Girl on the Train, that you would hate these characters more. That in Girl on the Train there was some, character development. There was some likability to some of the characters. But here there's, no likability. And it's much more of a bird's eye, kind of like a bird's eye view of the characters rather than getting down into it. And I will say I don't entirely agree with it doesn't get down and dirty with some of the characters. I feel like with Jules, the estranged sister, it does. Because you do really get into her history of why she was estranged from Nell and her history trying to get away from this town and get over what happened to her. So I don't entirely agree with that statement that you don't really get into it that much with the characters, but I do see where they're coming from with that statement. Because one of my issues with this book, there were so many characters. Oh my god, there were so many characters, and I, especially in the beginning, I had to keep flipping back to double check who was who and who they were talking about. And the especially if you took a break, it took me 5 days to get through this, for a variety of reasons, not just this book. But if you walked away from it, when you came back, I felt like I had to refresh my memory. Okay, the next chapter is Mark. Who the hell is Mark? It got... it could be very trying, you know, because I felt like I was constantly flipping back to the beginning of the book, like, what are they talking about? So, because you have the police inspector and his assistant, you have the police inspector's wife and father, you have, uh, well, Nell and Katie, I guess, don't really get their own chapters, but, you know, their characters you have to keep track of. There's Lena, there's Jules, there's Mark, there's Louise, there's Josh. I mean, we're up to, what, like 11 now? So there's too many characters. And it felt so dead. It felt like a dead manuscript. You know, in terms of handing out the clues, it felt like it was so obviously a clue. It wasn't something that you would go, you know, you would keep reading and then they would re-reference that clue and you're like, oh, you know, I completely overlooked that the first time through. You know, there was nothing like that. And that's the kind of thing that I like, where, you know, like the Agatha Christie, the Poirot, where, you know, they noticed a hair on a lapel and no one else noticed it, but, oh, yeah, wow, no wonder you're the smart guy, you know? You know, and I told my husband, it felt like this entire book felt like a Valium-riddled drug addict. Just clue. You know, like, it was just dead. It was, you know, whenever they got around, oh, I guess it's time for another clue. You know, so it was really kind of disappointing to me. And the entire time, it felt like, it's like just a series of cliches. It's a series of cliches. Let's see. I wrote down all the cliches I could come up with. Small town with secrets and historical lore. Pretty sister, ugly sister. Sex siren causing trouble. Illicit sexual relationships. Ugly sister with lingering psych issues, eating disorder, anxiety, and don't forget, childless. And it's just, the entire time I felt like, wow, it's like Law and Order SVU Small Town. Like, I've seen this episode before. I've seen several of these episodes before. You know, I felt like it should have come with its own little, you know, for Law and Order. So, that was really disappointing. Now, even the, you know, I mentioned Jules, the estranged sister, you know, she was, the ugly sister growing up, and, you know, it gave her, you know, some of the roughest childhood experiences. At one point she's raped and Guy thinks he's just doing the fat girl a favor. And she, you know, through the book she kind of finds this strength, and every so often it'll backtrack a little bit, but then she'll find the strength again. And even that feels kind of weak and limp, because it's just like, oh, I hope I... Hold on, let me get the exact quote. 379. It's pretty much an almost 400-page Law and Order episode. But I'm trying. I remember the fearless version of myself who surfaced the day I confronted Lena's father. I would like that woman to return. You know, and it's just... Don't get me wrong. I have anxiety of my own. And, like, it's clinical anxiety. So it's not just the I'm occasionally nervous. Like, I have anxiety. So I get that... I get the experience of having anxiety, but at the same time, the way it's written, it's just like, it's so weak, it's so limp, it's so boring, it's so like, like, why did I bother with this book? But I did write down some positives. So let's go through some of the positives. So, part 4, which is pretty much the epilogue, is the best part. That's where it really kind of, you know, kicked it into gear, and where's everybody going, where's everybody now. But even then, it's kind of like the cliche of, oh, this big thing rocked our town, everyone's leaving. You know, it's, you know, because Louise is leaving, Josh is leaving, Jules and Lena are leaving, Sean disappeared, Patrick's in jail. You know, so even in that, it was kind of a cliche. But it did have one final twist, which I admit I was surprised. But Miss Hawkins, why did you wait to the last frickin' sentence to surprise me? Like, I don't feel like the last sentence redeems the rest of the book. I'm sorry, I don't. Let's see. The Hanging Thread of Mark Henderson. I did enjoy this. At one point, Lena goes to attack Mark Henderson, who has been having a statutory relationship with her best friend, leading up to her best friend's suicide. And that is the one in the book that is a suicide. So she goes to the house, she waits for him to return from his holiday, and when he comes through the door, she just has at him. And he ends up in the process of self-defense, knocking her out. And instead of just being like, hey, she attacked me, he acts like a guilty person does, and stuck her in the boot of his car and drives off to some holiday home. It's like, well, great, that doesn't make it look, guilty at all. But I digress. So they get there and they're talking back and forth, blah, 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 blah. And eventually she attacks him again with a nail. And it is left very vague, like no clue at all what she did with him, except, he's not coming back. Oh, okay, so obviously he's dead. But how did she do it? What exactly went down? There's a scene where she's running away when they come and get her. She has blood on her face and, she's like shaken up and everything. Doesn't want to be touched. So there's blood splatter on the walls and stuff in the table. So you know something went down. He's dead. But you really just want to know what happened to him. So that, that was kind of cool, that little hanging thread. And then I kind of liked, there was a theme through the book that I noticed, and that's the theme of the good man, quote unquote. Just some examples. Patrick, the detective's father, the widowed army police vet, early on in the book, the outsider, police officer from another town who comes in to help, she, makes a crack response about him, and one of the natives is like, you should show some respect, so, good man, but he killed his wife. Sean, the actual detective, mother committed suicide, presumably, but he had an affair and he killed Nell. And if you're wondering why his mother committing suicide makes him a good man, that's something else that keeps, kind of popping its head up in the book is, well, my mother killed herself. I became a police officer. I'm a good man. Mark, the teacher, statutory rape and a coward. But the community saw him as a good man. He was a teacher at the school and people liked him and respected him. Robbie, Nell's boyfriend, he raped Nell's sister, Jules. Nell never knew about it. She thought that okay, I take that back. You can't entirely know what Nell thought of him because you never really get into Nell's mind. But Nell didn't know about the rape, so she didn't see him in that light. She saw him as her boyfriend, the kind of sort of good guy, or however she saw him. So, and then Erin's father, Erin being the police officer from out of town, they mentioned several times, her father was a good man, but he was an abusive alcoholic. So you have all these presumably good guys who in real life are not good at all, but the public perception of them is they're good guys. And another theme that kind of comes out, something that kind of keeps stringing along throughout the book is, why is it the woman's fault? Why is she the one who had to be thrown off the cliff? Troublesome women. And Nell writing in the corner of her manuscript on this area, Beckford is a place to get rid of troublesome women or something to that effect. So, questionably feminist tone through there, in troubled relationships, the public perception of whose fault it is versus the reality. It's from that point of view, yeah, it's interesting, but I think in terms of the carrier of the message, the medium of the message, I could get it somewhere else in a more enjoyable book. So, I mean, and I hate to say it because I was so looking forward to this book. I was so excited. It has a cool cover. I know, don't judge a book by its cover. But this was one of the books with a really cool cover. And it was by the woman who wrote Girl on the Train. And, you know, it sounded good. But it was so flat and boring and blah and ugh. So, I mean, so that's, I don't know. I feel like I said, it felt like an episode of SVU. And at least I like the cast of SVU. You know, it gives me something fun to watch. You know, interactions that are fun to watch. But I was really disappointed in this book. So, you know, hit me up in the comments. Tell me what you thought if you've read this book. Would I recommend it? Not really. You know, find something more intriguing, more interesting. Read The Last Policeman. That at least is halfway decent. I did recently start reading Countdown City, which is The Last Policeman #2. And so far so good. You know, I'm enjoying it. So hopefully I'll have a video out about that soon. I did finish The Handmaid's Tale. I was thinking about doing a video on it. I don't think I will, just because it has been, like, so many people have written about it. So many people have already read it, have, you know, kind of put their 2 cents in about it. I feel like I would just be adding to the noise. But overall, I do recommend Handmaid's Tale. I did really enjoy that. And that's another one, like, you know, I really enjoyed The Handmaid's Tale, but I tried reading another one of Margaret Atwood's books, The Heart Goes Last, and I couldn't get through it. Like, I hated it. So, you know, and maybe that's the case with Paula Hawkins. You know, maybe I would read Girl on the Train and I would like it. Who knows? But hit like, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Hit me up in the comments. Tell me what you thought of this book. If you've read Girl on the Train, should I bother reading it? Is it good? Is it not? Should I see the movie instead? And in the meantime, you know, give me book recommendations. Tell me what you think I should read. And until next time, readers, you have a beautiful day.